Hi guys, welcome to another video. I'm Man Jon. This is only going to be a short video, and what I thought I'd do is go through my Mudman settings with you on the XP Deus. So the base program I used for the Man Jon program was the hot program number 9. So you need to scroll to that first, and then we make the adjustments from there. So when you go to the hot program, your discrimination you want to set at -2.8. I run -2.8 the majority of the time because I like to hear the ground noise. If the ground on the sites that I'm on starts getting a bit too chattery and it is too noisy, I will put it into about a +2.8, but the majority of the time I'm in -2.8. If you go into the expert settings, you'll be presented with the tones. The Mudman program, I like to run it in full tones. The reason for this is I've tried the other tones and the full tones just suits me better. I find I can pick out the signals better on the full tones, and I get the whole range of sound. Like I said, I like to hear what's going on in the ground, and I find on the full tones I can pick good targets out from bad targets a lot easier. I usually run the sensitivity at 93. If the ground is too loud or it's too sensitive, yeah, you can lower it, but sensitivity typically is to suit the individual and the ground you're on. For me, I like it in 93, but that's up to you. You can change it to suit the ground you're on. I have both coils, the X35, the 11-inch, and I have the 9-inch high frequency. Whenever I'm starting a site, I'll usually, if I've got the high frequency, I'll start it in 14.4. And if I need to raise it, if I'm on ploughed land, I'll go up to about 28 kHz. But typically I'm around the 14.4 mark, and I find that works well for pasture too. If I use the X35 coil, I'm usually at around 17.5 kHz. If the ground is quiet, I'll lower it to about 15 kHz. If I go on ploughed land with the X35, I'll raise it to the highest it can go. I like to run my iron volume at 3 because I like to hear what's going on in the ground. I find the iron volume at 3 will give me that nice iron buzz, and I can hear if I'm in an iron infested area, and if I draw back from a pinpointed target, I know if it's big iron or not. Reactivity I usually have at 2, and that's the same with the high frequency and the X35 coil. I typically leave it at 2. I don't go any lower than 2. If the ground is quite noisy, or if I'm on an iron infested site, I'll usually go to about 2.5 or sometimes 3, but typically I'm around the 2 or 2.5 mark depending on how noisy the ground is. The silencer I always run in -1. Doesn't matter what coil I use, I always run it in -1. But what you got to remember, if you go back and you change the reactivity and you go up, you always want to check in your expert setting that the silencer is in -1. For the audio response, I usually have it in 5. I think 5 works well for me, but again, that's down to personal preference. Some people like it lower, some people like it higher. I just like it at 5, but you can set that to whatever suits you. Audio overload, I just tend to leave it in the default of 1. Notch, I don't notch anything out, I just leave it in the zeros there. And now we're back to the start, to the discrimination. Now, if I was running the X35 coil, obviously you get an option for TX power. Now I always run it in a TX power of 2. The high frequency coil, of what I've read, is a default of 2, so I don't need to change anything there. So just a fast recap. So your discrimination is -2.8. I'd have that as the max of the, if you go you're lower there. But if you're going to go higher, I usually raise it to about a +2.8. Sensitivity to suit, I usually run it in 93, but that depends on your site. Frequency, on the high frequency coil, I always start with 14.4. I'll raise it to 28.8 if I need to, or 28 kHz. If I'm using the X35 coil, I usually start around 15 and I go to 17.5. If the ground's really noisy, I'll go up to the highest it will go, 25, and I go into the expert menu and then up it from there. Iron volume, I have it at 3. reactivity 2, silencer -1, audio response 5, but that's personal preference, don't notch anything out, and I run it on full tones. So that's the Mudman program, guys. For the Mudman program, I always use the XY screen as well, because I think it gives a good indication of what's under the ground. I just like the XY screen. With the ground balance, I always manually ground balance. I usually have it in around 89 or 90, because that suits the majority of the sites I'm on. Though I do look at the reading when it appears up here, and what I will actually do, if it goes down really low to something like in the 70s, say if it was 76, I'd manually change it to about 78. I always stay about 2 to 3 above it, but I never go below it. Another thing what I did as well is that I have the silicone cover for the Deus, and what I was finding in the field is that I couldn't read or see the screen at all. So I actually just cut a hole out. I've got a screen protector on the Deus screen, so I just cut this hole out here. It works a lot better. Now, if you haven't read this book, it is really good. It's called The Deus Handbook by Andy Sabish. I think that's how you say his name. But I read this book when I got the Deus, just to get an idea of some of the things that I could do with it. Now, it does give you some different programs at the back. Now, my Mudman program was based off my preferences in the field. Now, when I first got the Deus, I tried all the programs that it had, and I found the Hawk program was good, and I just made the adjustments to suit me, so that's where the Mudman program was born from. I did used to use the GM Power program as a base program for this, but I find the Hot program works a lot better with it. So they're the settings I use out in the field. Everyone has different preferences of what they like to use, so have a try if you want and let me know what you think of it. Happy hunting.